Hey everybody, Chris Samardage, Brotherhood of Light Show Current, Facebook channel. So this week we're going to do a follow-up on our 16 Guitar Innovators show, which we did last week. And in the comment sections on all the Facebook groups, everybody mentioned a guitar player they wanted to see in there. I kind of went for the low-hanging fruit. I went for the big rock star guys that kind of created, that had a lot of hits and a long career. I also had Robert Johnson in there, and I also had Keith Richards. So just to make sure, I'm not going to have them on this show. So we're going to do our next show. It's going to be 52 guitar innovators or guitar players that were influenced by these innovators. So let me go to screen share here. I'm doing my screen share right now. Share. Okay, now I'm going to get my laser pointer going. Laser pointer right there. And here we go. So we got B.B. King up there on the left. And so the deal is the Guitar Innovators #2 show. And it's 1965 to 1974. Okay. Some people were mentioning guys from the 80s. And there's some great guitar players from the 80s. But my thing is the 60s and the early 70s. So I just focus my shows on that because there's so many guys doing 80s, 90s shows. I'm focusing my niche market here. Okay, and then the rest of the title is and the guitar players influenced by the guitar innovators. So you've got of blues and rock and roll. So what you got here is you're going to have the original innovators, and then you're going to have guys that were influenced by them on the second half of the show. So I'm going to go to my next shot here. And here they are. Here's our original page, first page. So we got Muddy Waters. We got John Lee Hooker. Then we got T-Bone Walker and Elmore James. And now over here in the middle, we've got B.B. King, Freddie King, and Albert King, the three kings. And these guys were kind of like modern blues guitar players. Not so much like Robert Johnson. They're playing acoustic guitars down in the South. These guys were playing like a lot of them out of Chicago and different areas. And they were on the Chitlin circuits and stuff like that. But they also played the Fillmore with a lot of these contemporary guys we're going to have in the show. So especially the Kings, the Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, they played at the Fillmore. James Cotton, other guys. So a lot of the guys we're going to have on the show actually saw these guys play and were influenced by them. Okay, next. So we got Steve Crawford from Booker T and the MGs. They had the hit in the 60s. And we've got Chuck Berry, who's basically Johnny B. Good style guitar. And then we got Bo Diddley, who did the 2-chord Who Do You Love style music. And then we got Buddy Holly with Not Fade Away. And then we have Dick Dale, the left-handed surf guitar player, and that's an early shot of him. And he created that surf sound that a lot of the contemporaries copied. And then we got Link Wray. Now, Link Wray is kind of like a very reverby, grungy, fuzzy guitar sound. He did a song called The Rumble. And it's kind of proto-punk, proto-metal almost. But Link Wray, these guys are truly influencers. Now we're going to kind of go to the next level here and see what's up here. So we've got Allan Holdsworth up here in the corner, and he was in a band called The Soft Machine, a number of other bands, but he is an amazing jazz rock guitar player. And then we have Steve Hackett right here, play with Genesis. Now, these two guys were kind of like prog rock guys, early prog rockers or progressive rock. Now they call it prog rock. Okay, then we're going to go down to Buddy Guy, who's one of the contemporary blues guys who was a little bit younger than the other guys. He's still playing, and he was playing the Fillmore circuit. Buddy Guy, Junior Wells were touring together. Junior Wells, a harmonica player. And then this guy up here is Danny Kirwan. Now, Danny Kirwan was the second guitar player in Fleetwood Mac, and he and Peter Green traded off together. And Kirwan played more slide harmonic style, kind of like an early version of the Allman Brothers. So I would say that early blues Fleetwood Mac was kind of the first jam band. It's just my opinion. Now we got Ry Cooder down here on the left. And Ry Cooder is, he played with the Rising Suns, which was Taj Mahal's first band, before Taj Mahal became a solo artist, which is pretty early on. And he did a number of studio stuff, including stuff with Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. And then the Buena Vista Social Club was that film he did. And that's a pretty famous movie where he got all the musicians to come up and play at Carnegie Hall from Cuba. Okay, and then next over here we've got, let's see, Ernie Isley. So the Isley brothers, he played with Jimi Hendrix early on. He does a great solo on Who's That Lady? And so he's sort of one of the innovators that came kind of from the blues and started going to the psychedelic. And then we have from P-Funk All-Stars, Eddie Hazel right here. And he did the famous song Maggot Brain, which is just this 20-minute psychedelic jam. I mean, it even goes beyond what Hendrix did. So he's, once again, another innovator. That was, both these guys were by request. Actually, everybody on this list except for Kirwan, people requested on Facebook for me to cover. Okay, next page. All right, so now we're going to go to Southern California. We've got Stephen Stills. We got Neil Young. And they were in a band called the Buffalo Springfield. And that was an early, mid-'60s band that had some great tunes. And then we have Robin Ford. And Robin Ford was played on the Joni Mitchell albums. And is a fine jazz rock guitar, very, very clean-sounding player. And then, of course, I think Frank Zappa is probably one of the biggest innovators of all time because he just covered every base. He did kind of hard rock, he did psychedelic, he did jazz, he did funk, he did orchestrated, he did comedy. He did, everything, and he did it all well. And he had a lot of great musicians that he taught and brought up through the years to play with him. And he was like an orchestra leader. He was really great. Died way too early of cancer. And then we have Randy California. He was in the Blue Flames with Jimi Hendrix back in 1966 in New York. And then his stepfather, Ed Cassidy, and him moved out to California. And they ended up forming a band called Spirit. And they had quite a few hits. And they did some really cool prog stuff on the I can't remember the name of it, Seven Sardarkadis or something, anyway. And then we have David Lindley, and David Lindley has a unique slide guitar sound. He played in Kaleidoscope originally, and then he went on with Jackson Browne, and then he did his own solo career, and he did an album called Ray OX. Check it out. Great record. Really good stuff. So he's an innovator also. Most of these guys are right here on this page, or they're at least influenced by the other guys. And now we've got some San Francisco guys. So we got Jorma up there from the Jefferson Airplane, left-hand corner up here. And he was a lead guitarist at Jefferson Airplane, and which was a big 60s band. And then he went off with Jack Cassidy and formed Hot Tuna. And he's been with Hot Tuna ever since, playing with Hot Tuna. And he is just a fantastic guitar player. He's got a Fur Peace guitar ranch, guitar school ranch out in, Columbus, Ohio area. Okay, now we've got Steve Miller. Now Steve Miller is from Texas. He moved to Chicago, played blues in Chicago, and then in '68 he moved to San Francisco, and he had a bunch of hit records, and he's got a great career. He's toured. He's never looked back. He's probably known as one of the big commercial success out of the 60s. Okay, so we got Harvey Mandel and Blind Al Wilson from Canned Heat, and they're playing at Woodstock there. And Canned Heat was known for the boogie, and they're influenced by John Lee Hooker in their music, and so they're influenced. They're not innovators. Now we got John Cipollina from Quicksilver and Gary Duncan from Quicksilver, and they kind of had a psychedelic jazz approach to their instrumental stuff. Plus, they were a great instrumental band. I mean, just really good. And then we got Barry Melton from Country Joe and the Fish, and they were just a wild psychedelic band, and they pretty much were the psychedelic band of San Francisco. Okay, so now we're going to go over to Ireland, Rory Gallagher is from Ireland, a great blues guitar player. And we got Alvin Lee from England, 10 Years After is the name of his band. And then up here we got a familiar guy, but he was around with an early band called the Amboy Dukes, and he is Ted Nugent. So he's kind of a psychedelic guitar influencer. I mean, he was there in the early days. I mean, people don't, they kind of see him now as this guy on television who likes guns and stuff, and kind of political dude, but he's an early player, and he's had a long career. But anyway, getting back to the classic band of all time, Southern rock, the Allman Brothers. We got Duane Allman on slide guitar and Dickie Betts picking over here, and Greg Allman in the back on Hammond B. And they created a Southern rock sound, and they created a dual guitar sound and a lead guitar. Just unbelievable band, and they're the musicians of this rock scene. Definitely legends of the music world. Okay, so now we're moving over to England, and we got Ron Wood here. And Ron Wood was with the Jeff Beck group originally, and then he was with Small Faces, and he has about a 30-year career, maybe 40 years, with the Rolling Stones as a lead guitarist. And then we have Mick Taylor. Now, Mick Taylor is a great guitar player. He played lead guitar for the Rolling Stones from 1969 to 1975, and some of their best guitar work he did, and some of their best albums he did. Now we have over here, we got Robin Trower. He was in Procol Harum for the first 3 or 4 records, and then he moved on a solo career, and he was kind of sounding a lot like Jimi Hendrix, like sort of this real similar style. And then we got Craig Chaquico from Jefferson Starship, who filled in for Jorma, and he had about a 20-year career with them and played some great stuff, great player. And then John Kay from Steppenwolf, and he's just a classic rock guy, and he played wrote a bunch of songs, played guitar, and sang for Steppenwolf, so he's just a classic rock guy. And then we got Terry Caff. He played with Chicago Transit Authority, and then they turned their name into Chicago. He was there for about 10 years. He's just an amazing shredding guitar player, and he kind of was one of the main songwriters and singers of Chicago in their first 3 or 4 records, and before they kind of went pop. And but he accidentally died of a gunshot wound, so it's really tragic. And now we got Joe Walsh, who started out with the James Gang, and he had a solo career, and then he went on to the Eagles. So he's one of the classic guitar players. Okay, let's get the next one. So now there was a fusion movement in the 70s, And we had John McLaughlin, who was suggested by some viewers, and then Al Di Meola and Larry Coryell. Now, these guys were all jazz fusion guys. I saw Larry Coryell play with Jack Bruce at the Fillmore, and McLaughlin was with Mahavishnu Orchestra. Now, Neil Schon, right here, is the lead guitarist for Journey. Everybody thinks Journey's kind of a pop rock band, but in reality, he played with Carlos Santana and on Caravanserai, which is really a jazz fusion rock album. And then he did the first 3 Journey albums before Steve Perry, and all of them have one instrumental that is jazz fusion. He is truly a jam fusion guitar player. Now we're going to move over to Gary Moore, who was played with Thin Lizzy, and he was kind of known as the English blues guitar player of the 80s and in the early 90s. He was that was his thing. And then we've got, make sure I get his name, Martin Barr, who was the lead guitarist of Jethro Tull. And he just did some fantastic leads on the Aqualung album. And throughout his career, he's a great guitar player. Now up here, we got Frank Marino from Mahogany Rush. He kind of was known for his Jimi Hendrix style, but he's really got a style of his own, and he's just a fluid player who could just go anywhere on that fretboard. I mean, he's just truly amazing. Great guy, Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. Now we got another guy who is a fusion player who went into the rock world, and he played with Zephyr out of Colorado, and then he played with the James Gang, and then Deep Purple, and then he had his solo career, Tommy Bolin. And he did 2 solo albums, Teaser and Private Eyes. And he died of a drug overdose, unfortunately, way too soon, man. He was really one of my favorites. Could sing, could play. And then down here, by request, we've got Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac. And he is also just a fantastic guitar picker and has his own style. You can definitely hear it in those mid-70s Fleetwood Mac albums. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we've got 54 guitar innovators, or guitar players that were influenced by innovators. Anyway, innovators number 2, and it's 1965 to 1974. And, people have asked for like Eddie Van Halen. And I'm just not covering the 80s, okay, or even the late 90s, or late 70s, excuse me. And if I go on, if I start hooking on guitar players like 73 and on, I'm going to end up doing another 50 that played in the 70s because there's so many of them. So I just kind of had to stop at this point and just focus on this particular time period and group of players. And they're early on, so they are influenced or innovators because they started out, they took from blues and then they created these different sounds with all these different gimmicks and wah-wah pedals and all different styles of music that they brought in. So that's why I'm covering these guys. But there's other innovators the next few decades, that's for sure. But this is what I'm covering right now, so it's all good. I'm really happy I got through this one. And okay, I'm back. So hopefully my camera's working nice and focused here. And thanks a lot, you guys. I really appreciate you watching the show. I'm going to try to post this thing to do a quick follow-up to my 18 guitar players. So totally, when you put together all the guitar players I had, or it was 16 actually, and 52, or was it 54? 54, you end up with 70. So basically I've just hit 70 guitar players, and most of these guitar players were requested on Facebook groups. And, like even it'd be in a Jeff Beck group and they'd go, well, what about this guy? And what about, Ry Cooder? And what about him? And what about him? So you guys are pretty educated out there, and thank you for the suggestions. So I tried to follow up and do a cool show. So I'm going to sign off. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Subscribe if you feel like it. So we'll see you.